friend or foe. I'm going to hand you over in a minute. The format for the night is slightly changed. We're very lucky. This, ladies and gentlemen, is being recorded for the Vincent Browne show. At the end, we will have some audience participation.
What we thought we'd do is that we would invite each of the speakers to speak for no more than 5 minutes each at the beginning.
All those decades that we've been told that we are net beneficiaries of our membership of the EU, the opposite is in fact the case. And the paper presented to the Joint Committee on European Union Affairs in Ballyhea by Dr. Karen Devine of DCU, which used the EU's own official estimates, gives us the real numbers. From 1973 to 2013, the EU funds received was 72 billion. Ireland's funds contributed back the other way with 31 billion. So the net benefit that everybody thinks we got was 41 billion. That's the accepted wisdom. But not included in that estimate, and coming from Eurostat's own figures, from 1975 to 2010, the fisheries commercial value taken from all waters was 201 billion euro. Ireland's share of that fisheries was 17 billion. So the EU net benefit from Irish fishing, according to the EU itself, was 184 billion, which means that there was a net benefit of our membership to the EU in excess of 140 billion.
The question is whether the EU is a friend or foe to Ireland. I would put it a bit differently. It's clear to me that it is in Ireland's interest to be a member of the EU, but I think it would be a mistake to think that EU institutions or other EU governments are Ireland's friend. The threat of the ECB, backed up by the French and German governments and the European Commission, in effect to force Ireland out of the euro unless you unjustly took on 64 billion in bank debt, which should not have been paid, you should not be liable for. Now, that is clearly an outrageous decision. It's clearly outrageous behaviour. If you think about it, taking advantage of your understandable desire to be part of Europe and your fear of being forced out of the euro to impose iniquitous conditions on you is the very opposite of the solidarity on which the European project is meant to be based.
I suppose the question is a very black and white one, Europe friend or foe, and the European Union specifically, EU friend or foe, and the answer is probably not so black and white. It's probably a little bit of a shade of grey, as Philip has quite eloquently said. And the answer from my perspective is that on balance, EU membership has been good for Ireland and will continue to be good for Ireland. I'm sure that you can list a whole range of small and medium-sized businesses around Charleville, around Cork, that have and do on a daily basis export their goods and their services to other parts of the European Union. If you dismantle the European Union, or if you opt out of the European Union, then you're cutting yourself off from that opportunity. And that, to my mind, in a globalised world, would be, quite frankly, madness.
In terms of the EU friend or foe, I will be black and white. Foe. Foe from the point of view of, not foe from the point of view of Ireland, as in all of Ireland, and Ireland that includes Dennis O'Brien, Tony O'Reilly, etc. But a foe from the point of view of the 99% in Ireland, working people, young people, unemployed people, pensioners, small farmers. And it's about shifting power away from bodies that can be put under pressure. I don't have any illusions in the Irish government, but you can see over the past 2 months they've been put under pressure on the question of the water charges. And so they're shifting power more and more from elected governments to unelected bodies like the European Commission, and in particular the European Central Bank. And they're also giving those bodies like the Commission the power to fine member states for not implementing enough austerity as like a counterweight, because they know they're going to come under pressure from below. The ECB letters are an extreme example of that. They're ransom notes to the Italian government, to the Irish government, by what is supposedly an independent central bank.
Good evening, everybody, and I'm glad to be back in Charleville. The last time I was here I marched with Ballyhea Says No, and all I can tell you is that they have informed my political thinking over the last couple of months and years, and I'm very happy about that. But to come to tonight's question, EU friend or foe, but if we go back to the ECB, that's supposed to be an independent body, but we all know that before Mario Draghi makes a major decision, he's looking over his shoulder to see what Angela Merkel has to say. But not just Angela Merkel. He's wondering what the Dutch are going to say, and the Austrians, and the Finns, and the Danes. So I just make that point to say that Europe is multifaceted and multi-layered. And that is an issue that we have to deal with when we're trying to sort this problem.
Including the bank debt, we are looking at €46,000 for every man, woman and child. And when we talk about the Common Agricultural Policy, who gets that money? Larry Goodman and his buddies get that money, not the ordinary farmer. And that's the way it goes. And finally, opinion polls show that trust in the EU is spiralling downwards. In an attempt to reverse this trend, the public are now being treated to brainwashing through, well, what's called the Blue Star programme running in our schools. I was invited to raise that lovely flag of one of my local schools lately. I refused. It's an abomination. It's not about fairness. It does our kids no good. The European People's Party's election manifesto, which Fine Gael remember, says we need education in the schools around Europe. Such education will be used to counteract ignorance. You see, if you don't agree with the EU, you're thick and you're stupid. We're ignorant and growing. It's to get rid of growing Euroscepticism.
Anybody else in the audience want to take part? This man here at the front, yeah. Just hang on a minute till you get the microphone.
Okay. Thank you. My question is for Luke Flanagan. Luke, you and I met outside the Dáil last February when I was protesting with other IBRC mortgage holders. You recommended to me that we go on strike, and I've been promoting that idea ever since. It's starting to gain some traction recently, and I believe that a national mortgage strike would give the people of this country the leverage to finally get the yoke of the 64 billion off their back. Luke, my question is, will you back it?
Yeah, I think it's an absolutely brilliant idea, and I thought the people who had the mortgages with IBRC, I thought it was the perfect vehicle and a kind of a manageable vehicle, or a collection of people to do it. And it's based on the theory that if you went into the bank on your own and you said to them, well, look, when you lent me that money, both of us took a risk and both of us made a decision. But the problem is, I'm the only one who has to pay for this decision, and the bank manager will tell you to go to hell. But if you go in there with 10,000 people who say that we ain't paying back all of this mortgage because no more than you, us making a mistake, you also made a mistake, so we're going to have to do a deal. And I agree, I think it's an absolutely brilliant idea. And you just need to find a mechanism to make it happen.
Who's going to pay for the debt? Isn't it that if that happens, that the Irish people will pay? The rest
well, the Irish people wouldn't necessarily pay. The European banking system would pay. And you've got to look at it from this point of view as well. In the long run, is it sustainable to have such mortgages in this country? It might be just about dragging along at the moment. But if there is any sort of shock, if there is any rise in interest rates, and remember, they are at historically low levels, if they go up, it won't be a question of making a decision not to pay it voluntarily. You just won't be able to pay it. So who's going to pay it then anyways? Because in the long run, I don't think we can sustain these debts. There is no job in Roscommon that can sustain a debt of €250,000 and still feed your kids. But that is kind of the debt that people have in my area. So who will pay it? It's a good question, but I think it's going to happen anyway.